At my father's retirement dinner, he raised a glass and said, "My real children are the ones who made me proud." Everyone applauded. Then he looked at me and said, "You can leave." I stood up. So did my husband. And what he did next left the entire room speechless. They say retirement parties are meant to be a celebration. A tribute. A final salute to years of hard work, sweat, and sacrifice. But mine? It turned into a public execution. And I was the one tied to the post. We were at Vincent's on the Lake, a high-end restaurant in Boston with string lights across the ceiling and white linen tables filled with glasses of champagne and hollow laughter. My father, Richard Walton, was retiring after 42 years in the legal field. Judges, lawyers, family, colleagues, they all gathered to clap, toast, and pretend like they loved the man who had built a reputation on precision and pride. And I sat there, in the far corner of the head table, next to my husband James, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. Because I knew what was coming. I had seen it in my father's eyes for years, cold, calculating, disappointed. He had 3 children. But only 2 of them were worth loving. My older brother Scott? Harvard Law, just like Dad. My sister Rachel? Pediatric surgeon, married with twins. Me? Emily Walton. I left law school after 1 year. Started a community arts program for underserved kids. Married a mechanic. Chose heart over status. That was my real crime. I thought maybe tonight he'd finally see me. Maybe he'd appreciate something other than a resume. Maybe, just once, he'd raise a glass and say, "I'm proud of all of them." But what he did instead. God. He stood with his champagne flute and smiled his rehearsed politician smile. "To the ones who made me proud," he said. Everyone clapped. Rachel beamed. Scott nodded modestly. My mother dabbed her eyes like this was the Oscars. And then, he turned. Right to me. The room quieted. He didn't blink. "Emily," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You can leave." I froze. At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe it was a joke. But no one laughed. They all just stared, awkwardly, silently, like they were witnessing something shameful but couldn't look away. "Dad," I said, my voice catching. "You've always gone your own way," he said sharply. "Now go." And that's when James stood up beside me. My husband. My quiet, dependable James. He put his hand gently on my back, helping me up like I was made of glass. I could barely breathe. My heart was thudding in my ears. But instead of walking me out, James stepped forward. And what he did next. It changed everything. He took my champagne glass. Tapped it with a fork. "May I?" he said, addressing the room. My father frowned. "James, this is..." "No," James said. "It's my turn now." I was stunned. He never did stuff like this. Never sought attention. But his voice was firm, and his eyes? Burning. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," he began, his tone calm but clear. "I figured this was Richard's night. A night for his family. His real children, as he just put it." A murmur ran through the room. But then I remembered something, James continued. "Real family doesn't throw people out in front of strangers. Real family doesn't humiliate their own daughter for being different. Real family shows up, listens, supports." His eyes moved across the crowd. No one dared speak. "I married Emily because she's strong. Because she's kind. Because when a kid walks into her art center crying, she kneels down, not to scold, but to understand. She's helped dozens of children avoid the same streets I grew up on. She's saved more lives with paint and compassion than most do with titles and degrees." My father's face turned red. "And if that's not something to be proud of," James said, locking eyes with him, "then maybe the wrong people are clapping." Silence. You could hear someone drop a fork in the back. Then, slowly, one person clapped. Then another. And suddenly, half the room was standing, applauding. For me. Not because I cured cancer or won a case in court, but because I stood tall in a family that kept trying to break me. I felt my knees wobble. Tears welled up, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't over. My father had drawn a line in the sand tonight. And he thought I would walk away quietly. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the start. I was done trying to be accepted. Now, I would show them exactly who I was. And they would regret ever pushing me away. They thought the public humiliation would crush me. But what they did next, that nearly did. After the retirement dinner, James and I left quietly. No yelling. No drama. Just silence, and my heartbeat echoing in my chest like it was counting down to something. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was sad, but because I was done being sad. I started remembering all the small slights, little things I had brushed off for years. My father forgetting to invite me to Rachel's engagement party. Leaving my name off the foundation's donor list, even though I contributed just like the rest of them. Cutting my mic short when I tried to speak at Mom's birthday. But what came next wasn't just disrespect. It was calculated. It was betrayal. And it started with a lawyer's letter. To whom it may concern. A week after the retirement dinner, an envelope showed up in our mailbox in Cambridge. No return address. Just the words. Walton Family Holdings, Notice of Transfer. Inside was a 5-page document. Legalese. Cold and heavy. I skimmed through it once. Then again. By the third time, my hands were shaking. My father had quietly transferred all his remaining trust assets, stocks, properties, retirement funds, to a newly created foundation. The Scott and Rachel Walton Legacy Trust. No mention of me. No provision. Nothing. Just a ghost. I wasn't just disowned at dinner, I was financially erased. They had been planning it for months. And the worst part? My mother had signed the papers too. The same woman who used to braid my hair and whisper, "You're my wildflower. You don't need to be like the others." She betrayed me too. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I drove straight to my art center. It was a Monday morning. The kids were painting paper masks. My assistant, Joy, looked up and smiled. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just need a minute." I locked myself in the back office and opened my laptop. Because I knew something they didn't. I might not have been their golden child, but I wasn't stupid. Years ago, before things really soured, my father had asked for my help digitizing some of his old documents. He was paranoid about tech, didn't trust assistants or clouds. But he trusted me. Or at least, he thought I was harmless. I still had backups of those files. Deep in an old hard drive, buried under receipts and photo folders. It took 2 hours of searching. But when I found what I was looking for, my breath caught. There it was. An older version of the original trust agreement. Dated 6 years earlier. My name was on it. Clear as day. Equal distribution of all family assets between Scott Walton, Rachel Walton, and Emily Walton. Signed. Notarized. Legal. That meant somewhere between then and now, they'd rewritten it. And they'd done it behind my back. Now here's where it gets dark. I cross-checked the timeline. 3 years ago, my dad had a brief health scare, a mini-stroke. That's when he and Rachel supposedly updated everything. But when I looked into the timestamp metadata on the scanned documents they filed with the new trust, something didn't line up. The documents were post-dated. Filed after the signatures were supposedly witnessed. In legal terms? Fraud. And suddenly, I wasn't just a cast-out daughter. I was the one holding the match and standing in a room full of dry kindling. James' plan. I showed everything to James that night. He read in silence, brows furrowed, jaw tight. Then he looked up. "Are you ready to take them down?" he asked quietly. I nodded. Not out of revenge. Not just. This was about truth. About standing up, not just for me, but for the version of me they never wanted to see succeed. We started small. James had a friend, Natalie, who worked as a paralegal at a respected law firm downtown. I met with her off the record. Showed her the docs. Her eyes widened. "Emily, this is huge." "I don't want money," I said. "I want exposure. I want the truth out. I want people to see the man they toasted. Who he really is." Natalie nodded slowly. "We can build something. But it'll take time." Fine. I had waited years to be seen. I could wait a little longer. But what I didn't know was that someone was already watching me back. Because while I was digging into my father's lies, Rachel was digging into mine. And she was about to find something I never expected. Something that could destroy everything, unless I beat her to it first. They always thought I was the weak one. The emotional daughter. The artist. The misfit who never made it through law school. But what they didn't know was that I'd been carrying a secret for 7 years. A secret that could ruin them. Or save me. And now Rachel was close to finding it. The phone call I dreaded. It was a Thursday afternoon. Cloudy, humid. I was driving back from the community center when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I never answer those. But something in my gut told me to pick up. "Emily Walton?" a clipped voice asked. "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Jennifer Sloan. I'm calling on behalf of the Walton Foundation." "Rachel." My sister had sent a lawyer. She continued coldly, "We're aware you've been contacting legal professionals regarding the validity of our father's trust. I'm advising you, formally, to cease and desist." My grip on the wheel tightened. "You're threatening me?" I asked. "Merely a warning. Pursuing this could expose other matters you may not want publicized." And then she said it. "Your student records, for example." I nearly swerved. That's when I knew. She had found it. The reason I left law school. 7 years ago, I wasn't just struggling with the pressure of law school, I was drowning. But no one saw it. My father thought I was lazy. My siblings just laughed behind my back. "Emily's making clay pots while we're winning scholarships," Rachel once said. But the truth was worse. In my second semester, a professor, someone respected, someone powerful, crossed a line. Inappropriate messages. Private meetings that turned threatening. And when I reported him, the university asked me to stay quiet. They said I misinterpreted his tone. They offered me a transfer. A fresh start, if I dropped the complaint. And I was scared. Alone. 24 and already broken. So I left. Never told my parents. Never told James. I buried it. But now, Rachel had found the withdrawal papers. And she was using it to paint me as the liar. The irony? She had no idea what the real story was. But her threats triggered something in me. That part of me I'd buried with that trauma. It woke up. The strategy shift. I sat down with James that night and told him everything about the professor, the withdrawal, the fear. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, his face was pale. "You were protecting yourself," he said softly. "And now they're trying to use that against you?" "They want me to back off," I said. "Because they think I'm ashamed." I looked him dead in the eyes. I'm not ashamed anymore. That's when the plan changed. This wasn't just about the trust anymore. This was bigger. This was about truth. And about taking back every piece of myself they tried to erase. So I went public. The article. James contacted a journalist he knew, Ari Levy, a local Boston investigative reporter known for whistleblower stories. We met in a quiet cafe near the water. I gave her the whole file, both versions of the trust, metadata analysis, and copies of Rachel's lawyer's call transcript. But then, I added something else. I'm ready to tell the real reason I left Harvard Law, I said. Ari stared. Are you sure? I nodded. If they want to weaponize my silence, I'll beat them to it. The article dropped 1 week later. Front page of the Boston Herald Sunday feature. Daughter disowned, Emily Walton breaks her silence on family wealth, fraud, and the secret that drove her away. It exploded. Reddit threads. Twitter storms. Legal bloggers picked it up like wildfire. Suddenly, I was being seen, heard, respected. And my father? He hid behind no comment. Rachel posted some weak Instagram quote about family privacy and disappointed love. But the damage was done. Even the board of the Walton Foundation opened a quiet internal audit. Natalie called me 3 days later. You did it. The fraud is real. They're going to have to settle or risk indictment. And yet, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Because my father still hadn't said a word. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a denial. He had erased me publicly. Now, he was waiting out the fire in silence. But I wasn't done. Because there was one final moment I needed. Face to face. Closure. Or confrontation. Whichever came first. The letter. I wrote him a handwritten letter. 3 lines. You told me to leave. Now I've built a world outside your name. I'm inviting you to see it, with or without the lies. Then I included a ticket. To my art center's upcoming fundraiser gala. The one I had fully funded myself this time. With community donors, artists, and friends, my people. I didn't expect him to come. But he did. And what happened that night? It was the moment I finally took back everything he stole. And gave it a name. That night, the city lights felt softer. Like Boston itself was holding its breath for what was about to happen. Our gala was held in a renovated old church downtown, now turned into a community art space. High arches, soft jazz, warm string lights hanging from wooden beams. Every painting on the wall was created by a child from our program. My world. My real legacy. James was helping at the check-in table. Joy was making sure the press got their media kits. The place was full, over 200 donors, city council members, artists, and local press. I stood backstage, in a navy blue dress I'd bought with my own paycheck. No label. No borrowed power. And then I saw him. Standing by the last row of chairs. My father. He looked older. Smaller, somehow. No entourage. No family. Just him. In a suit that no longer commanded the room. And when our eyes met, something passed between us. Not hate. Not even sadness. Just truth. My speech. I walked up to the podium. Took a deep breath. The crowd quieted. I started slow. 7 years ago, I walked away from everything. From law school. From comfort. From the idea that success had only one shape. I looked around. And for a long time, I thought that made me a failure. That I didn't belong at tables like this. I paused. But then I built my own. I gestured toward the crowd. To everyone in this room, you believed in something bigger than grades or titles. You believed in heart. In change. In art. The audience applauded. But I wasn't done. I looked right at my father. And I said it. And to the man who told me to leave, thank you. A hush. Because you gave me the push I didn't know I needed. You closed the door, so I could finally stop knocking. And when you erased my name, you freed me from carrying yours. The crowd didn't cheer. They just watched. Stunned. Moved. My father didn't blink. But his mouth twitched. Like he wanted to speak. But didn't know how. The aftermath. After the event, people lined up to shake my hand, take photos, offer funding. For the first time, I wasn't the background daughter. I was me. And as the crowd thinned, my father approached. His face unreadable. I tensed. He reached into his pocket and handed me something. A check. Folded. I didn't even look at it. I handed it back. I don't need your money, I said quietly. Not anymore. He looked me in the eyes. I know. A beat. I was wrong, he added. Silence. I nodded. You still have time to be better, I said. And I turned. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. 1 year later. The community center now serves over 500 kids a year. James and I bought our first home just outside the city. And last fall? I got a letter from Harvard Law. An apology. A full investigation into the professor. He resigned. Quietly. But it was enough. They offered to reinstate my admission. I declined. Because I didn't need their degree anymore to know I was whole. I wasn't the forgotten child. I was the one who survived, then thrived. And I've never looked back. They clapped when he told me to leave. But when I stood in my truth, they all had to stand for me.